Okay, our next exercise that we're going to talk about are memory drawings. Memory drawings are just that. You'll draw from memory, from something that you observed within the last 24 hours. This could be an event, it could be an object or a scene. For me, it tends to be interactions that I thought were interesting or noteworthy. What does come to mind when you go to recall something that happened in the last 24 hours? Well, it's generally going to be the most interesting things that you observed. So one thing I think you'll notice as you start to undertake this exercise is that some visual information may be difficult to recall. You may recall certain details or maybe an emotional impact about a scene, but there may be things that, just don't come to mind easily. And so this exercise is designed to build up that visual memory recall. And one thing I think you'll notice as you do this is you will begin to look for these cues more often. You'll look for the big shapes and the gestures that you see in the poses and in the interactions. Once you know that you intend to capture one of these moments and communicate it visually in a drawing, as interesting things happen throughout your day, you'll be more likely to capture the visual information surrounding that event. Okay, so let's have a look at this exercise. It's quite simple. I would say take about maybe 10 minutes on these drawings. I will show you an example of one that I did here. Though I'm doing this one digitally, I would actually recommend that you do these drawings traditionally. I did it this way so that I can demonstrate it. But I think in traditional drawing, it's much more accessible. It's quick and easy to get, just a pen and paper or a pencil. Have it on your person. And I find the drawings to be easier in that medium. But you can use the medium of your choice. So I had this memory of an interaction. I went to pick up my child from preschool, and some of his classmates were more interested in picking flowers than going home. And so mom was kind of tugging on him, and there was another child there that was being obedient and just waiting for the other child to come around. When I started this drawing, I was really thinking about shape. What I recall was that there was a little flower here. Shape doesn't really matter, that's more of a point. But the shape that I was interested in was the child reaching for the flower and then kind of almost looking like a sack of potatoes that the mom was kind of pulling, right? And then mom, of course, has to be, you got the arm, but you've got this weight where she's pulling away. Her motion is going this way, and the weight of this object is going that way. And then, of course, you got this stable character here who's just kind of waiting, right? So those were just the main shapes that I went for right off the bat. And then I started to explore a little bit more and get these scratchy lines in to figure out like what needs to be defined here. So I need to define the volumes of the head, the arm, the legs, where's the what's the gesture of the torso. He's kind of leaned in here. I've got him kind of boxed, box torso, and then hips here. So then his leg is here and it's kind of tucked in. His two legs are kind of together. He's just sitting down. He has no interest in standing up and going with mom. And then, of course, we got this arm that's reaching for the flower. And then up here, I had this hand here. Maybe mom is grabbing his elbow, right? Now, I started to block in these basic forms and volumes, trying to figure out what is mom's pose here. Is she really tugging very hard on him? And I thought, I can't remember. I think she was carrying a bag, so we put a bag in there. And this is one of those things I didn't really capture that visual information, but I do recall that she did have a bag, right? So I'm starting to block that in. Okay, so then next, this was my initial block in with my rough lines. Then next I took it to a cleaner line pass. And if I were doing this in traditional, I would just go with a soft touch with a mechanical pencil. And then as I commit to certain lines, I would bear down on that a little bit more, so it's a heavier line, but then try to make those definitive strokes, like just one, and that's the contour for the leg or the contour for the bag. So that's what we're doing here. We go from that really scratchy drawing to something that has a little bit more definition. Again, we're not worrying too much about this being this wonderful drawing. It's just recording visual information from our memory and getting that to a point where we are communicating it, able to communicate it to someone else. So then the next step was I didn't like this overall impact. I remember the child reaching for the flower and the mom kind of pulling the child. But this, now that I've defined this, it almost feels too aggressive. And that wasn't the emotional impact of the moment. It was actually just kind of funny. He wasn't getting dragged, really, but he definitely wasn't interested in going along. So I thought, okay, in order to communicate this well and really communicate the essential of the memory, the essential was this weight, the child pulling this way, the mom pulling that way. And it was kind of funny that the little other child was standing there patiently waiting. So this to me does not really communicate the essential as well as I intended. And so what I did is I came through here and I removed the mother and kind of reposed it with a little bit less of a combative pose, where she's looking right at the child and she's pulling on him, and just all the weight and the attention is just right there. And in this, it's similar, but her attention is this way, and her pose is a little bit more confident, a little bit more stable. And so I think that better communicates the overall impact, the overall effect that I was drawing out of that memory. And now the last step then is just brought in a little bit of shadow shape to reinforce those volumes and form. And to me, this is the extent that I'm interested in going with these memory sketches, about 10 minutes or less. And in my opinion, the more that you do, the better. And so if you can get to a point where you have communicated the idea effectively, visually, through your drawing, then move on to the next idea. And so memory sketches, I think, are a wonderful exercise. I have a few more drawings that I could share with you from my sketchbook, and I'll do that now. Okay, I had to pause the recording for a second there so I could pull up my files, and here's what I've got. So particularly here, we're going to look on the left-hand side. This was a sketch of my kids, my little guy. Well, he went to drink a smoothie and got a little bit overambitious and put it directly on his face, and came in the room to find this just purple circle right on his face. And it was pretty funny. Of course, the sister was there, pretty amused by that too. So this I have to draw, have to record this. Here's another example here. This one's much lighter. This one, I'm just looking here on the left-hand side here. And as these two people here were talking, these birds came down and were just eating whatever people had dropped there right next to them. And I just thought that was kind of interesting to see those birds get so close and the people talking oblivious to what was going on with the little animals. So, that was a memorable part of the day. Must have been a pretty relaxed day then, if that was the most memorable part. But that was something I wanted to record. Okay, and then over here, this drawing here on the right, this was a memory drawing. And there was a little soccer game of little junior kids running around. And there was a coach who was half engaged with the game and half engaged with his phone. And I thought that was humorous in a sad way. I thought, okay, well, that was a memorable part of my day. I'll record that memory here. So these are kind of my real life practice of memory drawings, and being a little more selective about maybe recording interesting parts of my day rather than doing this purely for the visual and drawing exercise. But This has been a great addition for me in my own practice, and I think you will find it beneficial for you as well.